Hey, y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle Housing Market Watch for November 18th, 2025. Welcome back to another Housing Market Watch. We took a break last week for the monthly market updates, and if you haven't seen those, make sure you check out those on the channel as well. Last week, I shared some pretty big news, and I'll share it here. Seattle hit a new median sales price record last month. It was the largest median sales price ever in Seattle, and that's more than even where the market was in 2022. Now, not every single place around the area can say that. In fact, many cities haven't gotten back to that point, or they have not or are not at that spot right now. But Seattle just hit its new median sales price record. I've shared over the past few months how I think Seattle has been hotter than other places, partly because of the price point. Seattle is more affordable than it used to be. The other areas grew so much. It made Seattle look more affordable again, and also the proximity to the jobs. So I think both of those have been a big reason that Seattle is outperforming some of the other areas and the suburbs that surround the city. Now, today we're going to look at a 2-week snapshot. So we're going to do something a little bit different because we skipped last week for the monthly market updates. I think it makes sense to cover the last 2 weeks. So we're not going to look at the 1st of the month to the 15th. We're actually going to be looking at the 5th of the month through the 18th of the month. So we're going to look at a 2-week snapshot here, and then we'll get back to the weekly updates to wrap up the month. But before we do that, we're going to look at the weekly stats. So this never changes. When we look at the Market Watch, we're always looking at a 1-week snapshot in King and Snohomish County combined, just looking at the inventory coming on and off the market. If we compare with earlier in the month, we're not seeing a huge drop-off in the new listings just yet, but it is declining, and we're going to continue to see that decline pretty heavily here over the next week and a half as we're hitting the Thanksgiving holiday. We had 396 new listings over the past week, 440 new listings earlier on in the month when we recorded the last video. That was the end of October to the beginning of November. We've continued to see a large amount of price reductions, 479 price reductions over the last week. And this is something we've been talking about for weeks, if not months. We've seen multiple shifts in the market this year. We are, I think, in the middle of bottoming out in a way. I think we're going to start to see the inventory shrivel up, and then we're going to start to see the market get a little bit more competitive here in the winter and the spring months. It's normal. It's part of the seasonal cycles that we see in our housing market here in Seattle, and I think we're starting to head in that direction. So we've seen a couple bumps in the market this year, and we're in the, I would say, more of the bottom of the bump, or at least really close to the bottom of the bump. I wouldn't say we're seeing any major shift right now. I think we've been seeing that and watching that over the past few months. I think that we have a lot of pending sales still, right? Lots of buyer activity. We saw 396 new listings, 761 pending sales in King and Snohomish County over the last week. Tons and tons of activity. We saw 606 closings. So again, looking good. We did see 267 canceled listings over the last week, and I want to share something. I've seen some people starting to make a pretty big deal about this or talk about how many canceled listings we've been having. Everybody's taking their house off the market. They're not going to sell their houses anymore, or they're going to wait till spring. For the most part, a lot of these houses are coming back on the market. They're not necessarily canceled. There's a strategy, and I've shared this many times, where you can cancel your property and relist your property. I think I talked specifically about that 3 or 4 weeks ago, but that gets employed a lot, especially when the housing market's a little bit slower. Drop the price substantially, at least 5%, and then you can relist your property. It's a new listing. So the canceled listings here, most of these, some of them are coming off the market. Maybe they're going to wait till after Thanksgiving, or maybe they're going to wait till the spring. But more often than not, these listings are going back on the market really quickly after coming off the market. Now, what's going on with mortgage rates? We've been seeing them hovering somewhere in the 6.25% to 6.5% range for quite a while now. They were getting a little bit closer to 6 earlier, maybe a month and a half ago, early fall, but we've seen, and a lot of this has had to do with the commentary from the Fed, the rates tending upwards, even though we've been seeing Fed rate cuts. And a lot of it is just the 10-year Treasury bouncing with some of the inflationary commentary. And so the general sentiment, I think maybe there's a little less confidence that we're going to see the rates getting towards the upper fives, mid fives. It would be amazing to see rates get into the fives. But unless you're getting a 15-year loan right now, the 30-year fixed is right around 6.36% this last week in Mortgage News Daily's survey. And if you're new to the channel, we follow Mortgage News Daily because they're surveying tons of the top lenders around the country. Okay, let's transition over to the King County stats. And this is going to be what I mentioned at the beginning. We're going to look at the last 2 weeks in King County, and we're going to get to see what's been happening with the sales. And these are not published as closed listings yet. These are all the pending sales over the past couple weeks in King County, and then we'll talk about Snohomish County. So starting with King County, over the last 2 weeks, we've seen a median sales price of $881. Not a huge number here, and a little bit less than what we saw at the end of the month. $900 was the median sales price, but $881, $100 here over the past 2 weeks in King County. Pendings with multiple offers. I like looking at this. I think this is interesting data. We've been seeing 28% of all houses receiving multiple offers in King County, 21% at the beginning of the month. So over the last couple of weeks, it's been hotter, at least with multiple offers, than it was previously. Interestingly, 7% of all the offers over the last couple of weeks have had an escalation clause in King County. At the end of last month, when we recorded our last video, 8% we're seeing the escalation addendum. So not as many escalation addendums, but more multiple offer scenarios. And most likely, these are buyers that are not necessarily competing on price, right? Maybe they're competing on terms. And let's look at the terms. Speaking of that, financing addendums, 79% of all offers had financing addendums. 75% the previous video, which was 2 weeks ago again. 51% with inspection addendums, 52% the previous video. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing more financing addendums, just slightly fewer inspection addendums, and we're seeing more multiple offers, right? And so I've been involved in some multiple offer situations recently where we're at the asking price. We didn't pay over. Right? Other buyers were either at the asking price too, or even going down a little bit. And the terms weren't necessarily a huge separator, right? They had a financing addendum. We had a financing addendum. We wanted an inspection. They wanted an inspection. In a most recent case, we had no inspection addendum, and that was a huge difference maker. But it's interesting just to see the competition's there. There's buyers, but nobody's trying to fight too hard for it, right? And I think that's been the big difference right now in the market is we have enough out there where people aren't necessarily fighting over every house, right? We're seeing price reductions, but then buyers are also seeing all that and they're not thinking, oh yeah, I just want to pay over asking price right now where all these listings are getting price reductions. And again, a lot of it's listing dependent. Sometimes agents are pricing, and a lot of times with the seller's pressure at the high side of the value or even above the value. As the market shifts, it's hard to look back at what happened 3-4 months ago and say, yeah, this is what your house is worth. Well, that was what those houses sold for 4 months ago, but it doesn't mean that's what your house is worth now. Well, my neighbor got blank, right? That's a pretty common thing that a seller might bring up. But I think if you're thinking about selling your house or you own and you're just curious, the market's changing all the time. And so what the seller got before isn't necessarily what you're going to get. And it also might be to your benefit. If you're in the spring and you're looking at listings from the winter to figure out what your house is worth, your house might be worth more and it might sell for quite a bit more. And that's why you see more of those multiple offer situations with escalation addendums, because the market has shifted in the seller's favor. And I think that's coming on the horizon. It might not be as intense as it's been in other years if the inventory doesn't shrink a lot. or if interest rates jump or stay kind of where they're at. But if we see the trend of inventory declining, I think we're going to see a little bit of that bump for sellers come late winter, spring in 2026. Now, Snohomish County is seeing just a pretty similar market. Nothing too drastic here. The median sales price is up a little bit, $769,950 versus $750 earlier in the month. We had it 98% of asking price was the same at the beginning of the month, so not too much has changed there. Pending sales with multiple offers, 21%, and it was 21% at the beginning of the month. The escalation addendum, 7% instead of 6%, but again, not too much has changed there. And then our last metric here that we track, contingencies. We saw 85% with financing addendums in Snohomish County, so even more than in King County, and 80% earlier in the month. Again, so an uptick there. The inspection addendum still more than 50%. And that's been a big trend shift over the past couple weeks, is that we're seeing more inspections included in contracts. Overall, though, Snohomish County and King County both are not extremely hot, but there are plenty of multiple offer scenarios and there are plenty of new listings coming on the market. And a lot of those are getting a lot of attention, especially in light of the listings that have been on the market for a while, that have seen lots, maybe multiple price reductions. So a new listing right now is actually a very welcome sight for most buyers, because there are plenty of buyers right now that know this is a good opportunity to buy. And if you didn't know that, it is. And they're excited to buy, but they also are kind of tired of looking at the same listings. And some of them are, again, still overpriced. Maybe there's something about them that isn't extremely desirable. But for buyers, yeah, this is a great time. If a new listing comes on the market, it might get multiple offers. It might sell over asking price. Some are still seeing escalation addendums. So I think if you're a seller and you're like, I really need to get my house on the market, or is this a good time to get my house on the market? It might be a strategic time to get your house on the market in one sense, right? You're going to at least stand out from the listings that have been on for a while. If you need to get some work done, or maybe want to invest a little bit of time and a little bit of money, it might make more sense to wait though until after the new year, until the inventory starts to decline a little bit. So I think either way, I think for a seller, there's some strategic reasons to either do it now or wait a little bit. I think for buyers, I'd be looking. And if I'm a buyer, I'm looking in the end of the summer and in the fall. I don't want to be buying when everybody else is trying to buy and there's no inventory, because that's just a recipe for competition. So if you're somebody who's been watching these and following along for a little while, or maybe just stumbled on this channel, I think my advice to you is get started a little bit early. It doesn't hurt to get your pre-approval done. It doesn't hurt to have a buyer consultation. I'd love to be a resource for you if you don't have an agent that you're already working with. But I think getting your ducks in a row and getting ready, what if a great opportunity comes up right now before the market gets a little bit hotter and you can capitalize on it? That's going to be better than waiting and fighting over a house, paying over asking price in the spring. So if you have questions about this or the housing market here in the Seattle area, I'd love to be a resource, as I said. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please consider doing so.